Friends, welcome to Gyan Ganga Words of Wisdom on the Virat Hindustan Sangam social media channels. As you know, we are every day at 8 p.m. Indian Standard Time having this daily talk show with Dr. Swamy and our guests. Today, our Wednesday special guest is Rajiv Malhotra, who is joining us live from New Jersey. And welcome him to our show. And it's always a pleasure to have him and Dr. Swamy discuss a variety of issues on our program. As you all know, today we will be having a discussion on is there an effective rescue package for India? So both Dr. Swamy and Rajiv Malhotra will have an exchange of views. I would now request Dr. Swamy to start the discussion.
Sure. It's a great pleasure to have Rajiv Malhotra here again. Today, he brings with him a vast experience in running giant corporations in practical knowledge. I don't think we can get any Indian, better than what he knows in minute details to how to steer the course from a storm that's ahead of you. So I think this question today: is there an effective, rescue package for India? Is a very appropriate one in which he is participating. So let me begin by first saying that there are three key words. Each will have to be defined. One is effective, the other is rescue, and the scope of rescue, and third is the package, the content of the package. So what we need, therefore, is an effective team that puts together the variety of subsections of the package and then puts it together as a single package. Now, in the case of fighting the coronavirus, Modi was lucky to get a minister called Dr. Harshvardhan, who's now been appointed as chairman of that committee, of most powerful committee of the WHO. Not that he'll leave his ministership. It's a special occasion committee that meets on urgent matters. But he was, brought in, and it's a very great honor for India. And he has, brought in the All India Medical Institute, the ICMR, the Indian Council of Medical Research, that is, the MCI, the Medical Council of India, a variety of things, and he put them together, and as a team they have worked. And while in the recent days, the growth rate percent and 2.5%, so we are not doing badly at all on that front, and that is largely because Modi had a team. But in the case of this economic package, there are two problems. One is that the economy was systematically declining from the end of 2015, as I've been writing over these years, and nobody believed it, and all kinds of fake institutions all over the world was giving certificates to Mr. Jaitley, who's the best finance minister, and all that on the whole of Asia. So we were, living in an atmosphere where we didn't believe that what I was saying was correct. And the real turnaround came actually in the late 2019, and where it was becoming very difficult without fudging data to get any rosy figures. And that's why in the 2019 elections, most of our focus was not on Vikas, as Modi had done in the previous elections, but on Hindutva, removing Article 370, Ram Mandir, etc. So, and Ram Mandir building was very close. In fact, before the election, we won the case. Of course, it was not the government's case, it was my case, which is on the fundamental rights. Of course, there were dispute parties and dispute on both sides, but in terms of giving the fundamental reason, that is of faith, to the thing, it was my petition which did it, and we won the case. Now, what I'm saying is that you need a very effective team. Now, who should that be? That's for the Prime Minister to find out, because it is his responsibility. But the fact is that unless you have a team, you can't do it. And at the moment, we got all kinds of novices, and it's a plethora. The Reserve Bank is there, and the Niti Aayog is there, then X agency, Y agency, everybody is there, and all having these non-professional, non-experts giving advice. The economic advisors are all youngsters who don't have the nerve to say it like it is. They may be, well educated, but they just don't have neither Subramanian, Krishnamurti Subramanian, the new man, as the economic advisor, and other Sanyal. Both youngsters essentially won't not stand up to politicians, and if they have not. So this question has been reflected that in the form that the team which today guides the Prime Minister doesn't know the difference between the supply side of the economy and the demand side. And that's why recently a magazine said that the all the measures that have so far come are for the are for supply side and for a demand side problem, supply side fix for a demand side problem. So the problem is demand, but the fix they are giving you is for the supply side. So naturally, it's not a workable. So I come to the first part, that it's not going to be effective unless you clearly recognize that your focus has to be on the demand side. And of course, supply side is not to be ignored, but the focus, the priority should be how to build demand once again, so that people start spending, people start buying, and so on. The second thing is rescue whom? Now here, they gave a lot of credit thing in this the last 4-5 batches of what they call a stimulus package. Actually, there was no stimulus. In fact, about 8-9 agencies of both Indian and foreign have calculated that the total share of the genuine stimuli in the total package of whatever 20 lakh crores or 21 lakh crores, that was the maximum was given by Goldman Sachs of 3%, and the Barclays Bank put it at 0.75%. 0.75% of the 21 lakh crores was for stimulus, and the rest was credit and write-off of the loans up to a period and so on. So I mean, they're more the liquidity type thing. So therefore, you must now know the first people to be rescued are the so-called daily wage workers or the migrant workers, who will create a human problem if you don't focus attention on that. And on that, you have to reach the money in their hands. There's no other way. You can't give them food packets and so on. That's not a workable way. I mean, it may be supplemental, but it's not workable. Second is that you must ensure that small, medium, and small industries, MSME as it's called, these get the necessary infusion as just transfers, not long-term loans or their previous loans being written off. In fact, whatever has been set aside in the package is less than what the government and companies owe MSMEs for their past work. And this is a scandal of the first order. The 5 lakh crores is owed to the MSMEs when the amount that is being set aside for MSMEs is only 3 lakh crores. So the issue is, if you're going to have a package, how big it should be. The Prime Minister fixed it at 20 lakh crores. Today we saw a tweet of Nitin Gadkari, which was, I think, subsequently withdrawn. But he made a speech in Shasta University in Tanjavur. And the audience, he said, 20 lakhs won't do it. You need 50 lakhs. He is correct. But unfortunately, his statement could not get publicity because as soon as it came out, somebody found out and it was withdrawn. What is the thing that we are going to address ourselves to? The GDP growth, according to this Goldman Sachs, is going to be -5%. And next year, that is 2021. It's called FY21. But the State Bank is just now, yesterday, come out with an estimate for -6.8%. And I've got this here with me, which is published in the Business Today. I've downloaded it. So every day it's increasing. I would say by the time we reach the end of this year, we will know that the decline in the GDP growth rate will be probably between 20 and 25%. And that's a huge fall. And that huge fall has to be turned around. So that's one issue which needs to. Second is unemployment, which used to hover around 15, 16%. I mean, the official figures used to be 5, 6, 7, but we added all those semi-employed, underemployed, all that. If you added, it came to about 15, 20%. I mean, between 15, 20%. But according to the estimates that I've seen and I've accepted, is unemployment will be 40% of the population. And a good part would be, of course, would be the migrant workers. The poor ratio, which was running, hovering around 16, 17%, had come down from a huge number in 1947 of 70% down to 15%, great achievement. Today will climb back to 50%. And that's mean people living below the poverty line. People are now reducing the number of meals they're having, the number of outings they have, the number of travel is suffering a lot. So they are a group. One group which has been totally bypassed is the travel and hospitality sector. And hospitality means, hotels, massage centers, haircut, barber, hairdressers, and so on. All these have so far got zero. And that's why today we are having all these problems with airlines coming in and being asked to fly suddenly. So this is now I will say one more thing before I turn it over to Rajiv Malhotra and hear his wisdom. Banks had deposited 8 lakh crores in Reserve Bank and earning 3.5% interest on it. Why? Because we were finding very little people wanting loans in the last 6-7 months. So they began putting the amount they had in the Reserve Bank and earning. This is called reverse repo rate. So that money has now been taken over by the government, and I recommended that they should. But you have to replace it. If you don't replace it, how will the banks function once what will happen to the NPAs? There are so many other issues. So the financial sector is requiring a great deal of attention. Another interesting, and the last one, honestly, I would not say a word more than that. The participatory notes, which was a most anti-national derivative that was introduced into our system, first by Yashwant Sinha, and then Mr. Chidambaram in a full lick. And that was essentially a very clever way of laundering black money from abroad into India. That had, because of all this anti-corruption action, so on, started declining. And it came down in March 30th for an annual year basis to 48,000 crores. And now it has risen by April 30th to 57,000 crores. So this is the only one that has risen. That means people are now using black money abroad for this purpose. And I would say that we have got a $1.5 trillion in foreign bank accounts. The United Nations Convention of 2005 gives you away. Yesterday I saw Sudan has got It's previous leaders' bank account money back. Gaddafi's money came back. This Egyptian leaders' money came back, and you also had Marcos' money coming back. But why we can't get our leaders' money back? And that's a question which will have to be addressed by the Prime Minister and an effective answer given. Over to you, Rajiv. I've taken some more time than I intended, but we want to hear you. Take your time.
Namaste, everybody. And thank you, Dr. Swamy, for inviting me and for a very succinct, brilliant, and sharp summary of where things are. I want to start my perspective at the bottom of the pyramid. I think the worst hit, the most vulnerable people are, I'm told, 130 to 140 million migrant workers. Now, if that number is correct, it's by far the largest migrant worker population anywhere in the world. I don't know of any such large group of people from one part of the country to another part of the country or to another different country anywhere else in the world, either as either such a big figure of workers being exported from a place or imported into a place. And in our case, it's both import and export is India only. We are moving them from one group to another group. Now, every migrant worker supports a family. So if you say on average 2 or 3 persons are being supported, then the total number of people supported by this workforce that comes from poor rural India to urban India and get jobs is a few hundred million. So if it's a few 100 million people worth of economy, how can it be ignored? I mean, and until this pandemic, it seems that there was no spotlight on this particular segment as a very important segment of the economy. You know, there is a ministry for NRIs or PIOs or something like that. I mean, I've never had anything to do with them, but I know they exist. And their job is to look after the interests of some 30 million NRIs that live around the world, because these people repatriate money. Now, if there are 30 million people abroad and some fraction of them are repatriating money, then this 140 million migrant workers is a far bigger population. I'm not aware that there's a ministry for them. I don't know, correct me, Dr. Swamy, if there is a ministry which focuses on migrant workers as a community that needs representation.
No,
okay.
There's no ministry.
So a ministry ought to exist. And it should not be a pandemic that tells us this is a huge population, they're vulnerable, nobody looking after them. It's not just rich people and NRIs and people repatriating a lot of dollars that deserve, kind of a representation. The migrant workers need help. So if you look at, for instance, the staff in my mother's house in Delhi, I talk to them on a regular basis. And I ask them how their families, how's the village, what's happening. And they come from many different villages in different states in India. They're different people. And they always say, we are supporting them. We're sending the money to support them. The villages are not self-sufficient. Yeah. The lady who is running my mother's house very brilliantly comes from a poor village. Her husband lives in Varanasi. He's a chef. He's out of work because restaurants are shut down. So she's sending money to look after the husband, the kids, her parents, his parents. So it's on the back of these migrant workers that rural India lives. So while economists have always said things like, there is this self-sufficient village economy, the traditional India lives in the village. Actually, what it tells me is that if there are 140 million people from these villages who are getting their income from urban India, and each of them is supporting a small family. So this total population of a few 100 million, and maybe I'm wrong in this calculation, but intuitively it seems a very large segment of India living in the villages depends on this migrant worker phenomenon. And it's a shame that nobody has been given the job to focus on this for the last 70 years or for the last 5 years or something. There should have been a lot more attention. Now, so this means that the repatriation, domestic repatriation from urban to rural is a huge phenomenon that supports a large population. So the top-down approach to the recovery package, looking after top-down, I think should be reversed. One should start by focusing on the bottom. One will have to give them money to survive directly. That money will give them buying power. It will generate consumption, which will then percolate up. So it will be help the bottom, and then it will filter up. It will be trickle up rather than trickle down, kind of a policy. And it's humanitarian. It's what morally we ought to be doing. So the concern I have is short term, these people are in trouble. They've been shunted around like cattle, going for buses, going for trains. They're standing around. Nobody looked after them until there was a hue and cry, and it was too large to be ignored. And then a reactive rather than proactive approach to send them this, that, to help them out. My concern is that the long-term effects could be very deep wounds in their emotions and psychology.
Yeah,
they bought into this one India. They bought into modernity. They bought into this India, amazing India, one India, this kind of a thing. And of course, Bollywood helped, and smartphones helped, and migrant workers have been a great integrating force all across India. This might reverse. This might reverse because they feel burnt. They feel that, okay, we were kicked out. When this happened, we got kicked out. So this is quite shameful, in my opinion. It could serve, and this is the most serious thing I want to say, this situation serves the interests of the Breaking India forces. There is more conversion going on. There is more recruitment by Maoists going on. When people are in distress, they look for wherever somebody will help them out. Whether they go to a church, whether they go to some whatever, if you look at in the central states of India, why the Maoists are so strong, they preyed upon people's vulnerability, people's poverty. Their land was taken away by mining companies. They felt exploited. There was no governance there. They were just left abandoned. Psychologically, these 140 million people and their families are in a similar state. So the effects of this could last for a very long time. Long after this thing may have recovered, and GDP as a top level figure may have been, after several years, maybe okay. My concern is that these are irreversible emotional, psychological wounds, and wounds about their identity as Indians that are very deep wounds that I did not see enough concern in the finance minister's package. They did not start out by saying, look, that is the heart of India. These are people that are vulnerable. They represent hundreds of millions of human beings. If 140 million people are working and supporting each of them, a few people, that's a large part of India. And it's mind-boggling that there was no statement about them at all. So I have more to say, but Dr. Swamy, I want to pause and see what's your view on all this.
Sure. No, I totally agree with you. And your only thing you're incorrect about is that there's no view expressed by the finance minister or the finance ministry. In fact, the finance minister went on record, and the Economic Times put it on the front page. She says, I don't know who the migrant workers are, because there is no institution which has a record about them. How can I do anything for them? So I had to, sarcastically write in my article in Sunday Guardian that if you want to recognize a migrant worker, he would have a big potla on his head, and in his hand he will be holding the hand of his son. His wife will be having a child on her arm, and she will be having a small potla on her head, and they'll be walking on the main highway towards their destination. You can recognize them because they'll be going in hundreds and thousands, you see. So in a sense, and then this was also stated by the Economic Affairs Secretary of the Finance Ministry. He said, it's easy to say that give them money for it to be reached and so on. So, I mean, this kind of helplessness was expressed about such a big crowd. I totally agree with you. It's a socio-economic disaster in making. And when the coronavirus goes away, and you are stuck with this situation where everything is bankrupt, and you God knows how you spent the money, but you don't have the banks don't have money, you don't have the government doesn't have money, people don't have money. How are you going to turn it around? I mean, there will always be a way, but do they have a plan? And to my knowledge, I have not seen any plan for the post corona situation, which could happen sometime by the time we reach Diwali. And we need to turn around where all these goals were impossible to attain, like this $5 trillion by 2024, which would have meant 14.4% growth rate. And we were nowhere near that. And now it is almost impossible. The exchange rate is also now for the dollar has gone up to 75.7 rupees. And so, all told, I would say the answer to your question that yes, they have made statements, but it shows an utter lack of sensitivity to the problem.
So the second issue or topic I want to discuss is that we are very happy that the death rate, the mortality rate is now, and there are a lot of speculations what may have caused it. Is it weather? Is it immunity? Whatever. But whatever the reasons are, this is good news. However, I'm sure if they were to give out the statistics every day, separating younger people and older people, actually the 3% is an average of maybe the older people are 10-15%. I know in the US it is 10-15% for the older people who have the virus, and for the younger people it is like 0.1, 0.2%. So it is possible that if they had segmented the population by age and not applied one policy to everybody, they might have had two policies, Young India policy and Senior India policy. And the Young India policy should be that let them work, come back and work, because their risk is very low and they are the ones who keep the economy going. So it could be that there was an overreaction. Like I know some people from villages that work in our house in Delhi, their relatives in panic because they have no job, they're all gone to the village. But when I ask them what's their age, I mean, it's a couple in their early 30s, they have young kids, they are not at risk. And there's no reason why these people should be chased out. And in the process, it's not only distress for them personally, but also the economy suffers because there are no workers. So they, in hindsight, and maybe they need to now plan for the next wave or any time in the future, they need to do a risk analysis by age, and then they need to have different policies for different age brackets. Sure. What do you think of that, Dr. Swamy?
Well, certainly, because the young people, say below the age of 20, are the future of our country, in the sense we have to, in order to gallop in our economic development, we need innovations. And that means young people, being educated to do research and come up with new inventions, complicated systems like the artificial intelligence and so on, requires a lot of deal of young brains doing research. And so you have to protect them, and it doesn't matter whether they're from poor families or rich families. In fact, whether it was Ramanujam or many of the other geniuses, they came from really very poor families. So I think the Indians have genius and can do it. Coming back to one question, you see, what I am getting a report is that the rural, let's start with statistics. We have 739 districts, of which we had 327 districts which didn't even have one coronavirus case. And then there were another 300 where we had a small number. Now, that means in the end, by the time they sort of separated out, only 81 districts really had a serious problem, what they call as the red zone. So, as I said this also, I think in my last occasion, they should have concentrated on that. But what is more important is that because you didn't give direct cash to the migrant workers and they went back to their villages, today the villages of UP and Bihar are, which were hardly affected, are all this peaking that you're seeing today, sudden new peaking, is because the villages which were unaffected in the past are today being affected by the migrant workers coming back. You can't stop them from going, but you can make them, you can seduce them to stay by giving direct cash transfer. And this, the finance ministry flatly refused, saying that, we won't have a register, we don't know who will get it. Of course, there will be a problem. The bureaucrats will make money, and there are a lot of corrupt elements in our system. But the fact is that you take that as a given, and this you should have done. And I think that's the biggest blunder that has happened, that the migrant workers were allowed to leave. Because if we start our production system again, we won't have labor, particularly with small and medium industries, particularly in the villages, in agriculture. In all these places, these people who have gone all the way after tying up their entire belongings, carrying it on their head, they are not going to come back very easily. So you can't kickstart your economy the moment the corona thing is over. And that's where the sensitivity towards what you just said. And these young people who are children of these people, they are not going to schools. They were going to schools in municipal schools in the urban centers. They were. So we have had a huge social problem with which no planning has been done so far.
So there is a medical problem which triggered a economic problem, which triggers a social problem.
No, it didn't trigger an economic problem. It accelerated, accentuated the economic problem.
Existing economic problem. Yes, it accentuated existing. Similarly, the breaking India forces, as existing forces, are being accentuated because all this is perfect. This is when there's a tsunami, the conversions go up. When there's some calamity, they go up. This is a massive calamity, bigger scale, pan India than what we've seen since partition. And so, our thinkers are not emotionally ready to call this. And I get a lot of flack for being honest and straightforward. People want to hear good news. People say, sir, aapne hamara feel good kharab kar diya. They want to feel good. Everybody wants some nasha, some intoxication. So I'm supposed to hand out some drugs to make them feel good. Rather than telling the truth that, we are in for some trouble. We all have to get together. We have to do a lot of tapasya. We have to downsize our immediate gratification and expectation. Work hard. This generation, the young generation is inheriting a messy world. I have to say that. My generation has left a messy world to the next generation. Whether we did it on purpose or not, whether we could have done a better job or not, notwithstanding, the fact of the matter is that they are starting out with so many problems all over. They have to become emotionally very tough and resilient. And not be in need of being pampered and hugged and kissed and told, everything is fine, ho jayega and all that. So this very weak, psychological, emotional, weak youth is also an issue. They got to toughen up. This ought to, the first thing this ought to do is to really toughen up our people. No, so what do you think of the emotional dimension of our people being very fragile?
Well, it is already there. It's not getting reported. There have been lots of violent incidents that have taken place. And
alcoholism is up.
Yes, because you made that easy to get. One of the few things you made easy to get. And the argument given to me by one chief minister is that I had no other source of revenue. I say I told him something which I can't tell on television, but I said there are other sources I can tell you where you can get more revenue. So therefore, this kind of unstructured thing. I think one of the things I feel BJP is losing is this ideological fervor which brought us to power. Today we find a state like Uttarakhand has nationalized all or the state takeover of all temples, including the holy temple of Kedarnath and and Kedarnath and Badrinath, you see. So therefore, we are today in a situation where I am not able to, motivate people to, because they say, what is this? You said the temple should not be in the hands of the government. We all agreed. But today, your own government has taken it over. Of course, I've gone and filed a case and a notice has been issued. But because of Corona, I have not been able to complete the case. But the fact is, this has happened. Same thing in Tirupati. They went on ballistic, our people, saying that the Jagan, who is the chief minister, is a Christian. He is selling all the plots. And then when the geos were made public, it turned out it was during the time when Chandrababu Naidu's party and the BJP had an alliance, and it was decided at that time. And the plots that had to be sold off was decided at that time. And the person who was leading the agitation in Andhra turned out to be a man who was a part of that subcommittee which decided which plots should be sold for how much and auctioned for so much. So I think this lack of care for young people, the poor, and all, it was not ever I mean, despite what anybody may say about us being right wing and so on, but this care for which was demonstrated, say, by RSS when the Morbi flood and the earthquakes took place, and in many, even today, I would say the only people who are really going on the streets and feeding are either the RSS or a few well-meaning people, in the industrial world. But as a government, I think it's much more. We are living in the theoretical world of, we are giving this injection and we are doing that. So on. That is a real essential problem. But let me ask you one question which everybody asks me. Why is the numbers in the United States so much larger than India's?
Well, if you look at United States, you should break it down by states, different states. And some states are very low, actually. Some states are lower than Maharashtra, Delhi, Gujarat, some American states. So the problem is New York and surroundings like New Jersey, which is right next door, got number 2 highest. New York has a large, Chinatown. Yes. And the Chinese go to China for New Year's celebration. So that is when this whole coronavirus was coming. And the Chinese government, in hindsight, could have just quarantined them until they're fine and then sent them back. But a very, very large number of Chinese from Chinatown go to New Jersey, go to China for holidays, and the New Year's is the biggest occasion. And they came back. There were no travel restrictions imposed at that time. I read a report that about 500,000 passengers by airlines traveled after the virus had started in China, before the shutdown of airlines. So 500,000 people, and much of it is New York based, So this started off. And if it goes undetected for a while, it just spreads like crazy. But I will say one thing. I watched the curves of daily new infections. Unfortunately, in India, it's still going up. It's now around 6,000 to 6,500. Hopefully, it will flatten, but it needs to flatten for a good 5-10 days before you know that the worst is over. In the United States, it has flattened. The total daily cases has gone down huge amount, 30-40% from the peak. New York has come down immensely. So now the problem in the US is second wave, because they've opened this beaches and things like that. People have had it and they want to go and enjoy a good life. So this is the risk of a second wave happening. India, the first wave is still climbing. Yeah. And because it's a very large country, only a few places like Mumbai have been hit pretty bad already. Yes. But the other places haven't. But as you pointed out, this forced migration of 130 million or so people to go running helter-skelter back to in any way they can. And if you look at the pictures and videos, there's no social distancing possible. They're all huddled together. Yes. And so this is going to spread it to other parts of India, and that is my concern.
Right. Well, Jagdish and our Ramesh and Professor Chaturvedi, do you have any questions?
I have
Yes.
3 points to make.
No, Arvind Chaturvedi.
I have 3 points to make. First is Mr. Rajiv Malhotra said about the percentage of people dying. Percentage has been calculated, and it is about 50% for people who are above 60 years of age, and 30% for between 40 and 60 years, and 20% below 40 years. This is just for the record, and that may be changing over a period of time. That may be slightly different from one state to other and so on. But this is the average. Second point is about migrant workers. We do not have 140 million workers. We have 80 million migrant workers.
But still it's pretty bad.
There is no migrant laborers ministry, migrant workers ministry. However, there is a central ministry of labor. Mr. Santosh Gangwar is the minister. And in last 60 days, nobody has seen him. Nobody has heard. No statement has come from labor ministry so far. The only step which has been taken for migrant workers is by UP Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath, who was just 3 days back appointed a migrant workers commission. And this commission, of course, he also made a statement which is not theoretically possible. He said any state government which employs workers from UP will have to seek permission from the UP Chief Minister, which is not possible given the democratic structure that we have. But what he has done is he has appointed this commission, and this commission will look into the opportunities to be created for the UP migrant workers within the state of Uttar Pradesh, so that they do not go out. And the question which I had,
if they don't go out, Arvind, then Bombay and other places are going to have problem of labor.
That is the third question I'm asking. I'm saying that when the workers are not, in fact, workers are even going back, even today, when the lockdown is just about to be lifted in 2 days' time. That means the workers who have migrated for years, they have been working in different states, they are not going to go back very soon. That means it will take time, maybe years. Some people are saying we will never go back. Now, that means the places where they were working, there is going to be shortage of workers. So even if we lift the lockdown completely and start the manufacturing activity, where are going to be the workers? So there is going to be worker shortage, and therefore the production will suffer. That is, of course, the supply line, but still. And the third implication of this is that workers who are rendered unemployed, Dr. Swamy said 40%, the extent of unemployment. This will create a void in the society, a disparity will be created because of the poverty will go up. The level of poverty, people who are living below the subsistence level, which is about 30-35%, it may go up to even 45%. Now, what will happen in the society? There will be disparity, there will be crime, there will be so many other activities. There's so many social implications, I mean, one can just think of. So these are just my few observations.
So I have a question.
Yes.
The breakdown of deaths, 50% or something, seniors, then 30% middle and 20% less. That's a breakdown of out of every 100 people who died. My requirement is different. I'm saying as a percentage of people who got the infection,
Right.
out of every 100 people who got the infection in the United States, out of that 100 people in the United States, up to 15-20% are dying above a certain age, and another group of 100 people who are very young who got the infection, not even one is dying. It is like 0.1%. So I'm looking for a breakdown of mortality rate, which means probability of dying if you get the infection. What
Right.
is that mortality rate, the risk factor? What is the risk factor broken down by age? Because that will allow you to make policy. If the risk factor for certain demographic group is very, very low, and those are the people in large numbers who are employed, and they are the ones who keep the economy going, there should be no lockdown for them. Because it's better to say young people go out and work, and older people look after yourself and back off and self-quarantine and go into self-isolation. Maybe all the old people should be put on trains and buses and shipped to some hill station. They can quarantine themselves. It's better to migrate the old people from the urban areas who are the ones at risk. Urban areas and older people are at risk. Let them fly and run off somewhere. Why mess up the lives of young people who are going to keep the economy going? This argument can only proceed if you have numbers. So the numbers I'm looking for are different numbers.
I understand. Okay.
Ramesh?
Ramesh, you have any questions?
Yeah, I'm going to just say. So I think one point what Arvind said about the minister, Gangwar, I think the minister is a migrant position. So we are not able to trace him. So that is the problem. He's himself a migrant, I guess, somewhere. But anyway, coming to the point.
A very good minister. I'm surprised that he is.
Coming to, so it has been 2 weeks since the so-called stimulus or package has been announced. So far, I have not seen any data that shows X number of people have benefited, or X number of companies have benefited, or X number of people have been benefited from it, because there's nothing. If you say take a loan, that's fine, but somebody should probably say that, okay, we've announced 21 lakh crores or the equivalent of that to thing, and we have not put out any statistics so far to say so many people benefited, because it creates motivation and people say, okay, let me get out and do something. Because today the fear, even when Rajiv said when young people should go out and work, the fear is, fine, if I go out, will I have a job? What's going to happen? So that is not being dispelled. So the mindset is still, a lot of fear is being perpetrated. So what do you think, Dr. Swamy? Is there some statistics that can be published to say what or how much of that stimulus has really gone to the people?
That's for you to tell. How you'll tell about India?
No, not for Rajiv. I'm asking you, saying that is there something that we can look for, and saying that is there any statistic that is available that people can go look for?
No, I'm sure that I would probably demand at the end of this month that there should be a white paper on all the money that has been spent so far, and how the allocations have been made, and what is the estimated list of beneficiaries. But as of now, the answer to your question is no such statistics has come up.
Okay. And the second one is the social, political, and financial impact of the migrant workers not returning.
Well, I don't think there can be any social impact, because frankly, Indians know how to adjust with each other and so on. But the economic effect of adjusting to a labor force which is no more willing to work at the kind of level at which the migrant worker was willing to work, and with the terms and conditions of employment with which they were willing to work, that will affect the reacceleration of the growth rate. If you're going to have a minus 5 or 6%, 6% is 6.8% is what SBI, latest report of SBI is saying, then how are you going to turn it around? And I don't think that contingency plan has been drawn up at all. I don't even know whether finance ministry people understand what contingency plan is.
Thank you, Dr. Swamy.
I have some comments to make and observations. As Rajiv Malhotra ji rightly pointed out, the vultures of forced conversion will be active, especially in these rural areas where all these issues are going to keep cropping up. And another thing is, the credibility of these packages are so low and people are making fun of it. One video which is viral and going down, and why I'm saying this is just to gauge the public mood like. There's a video when Modi was CM, he's seen addressing meetings and making fun of packages of the UPA regime. And he's saying that, have you got any benefit of the packages announced from time to time? And people roaring and saying that, no, no, no. So just now the common man is just confused of these packages, and it's not migrant labor only. The white-collared labor, the blue-collared labor, the small businessmen, everybody is confused. Where is the package? Where is it going? So this socio-economic problem and the credibility of the government of any package is so low, even if there is something the end of the tunnel, or they are not ready to believe it. And industry use small things to do with the bank. For example, people are asking shops and establishment that you have not your machine, merchant establishment, that you have not swiped your machine for sale in the last 2 months, you have to pay a penalty. See, one side government is talking of giving incentives, other side the banks and other sectors are fooling the people. So people are just being fed up with all these packages. They don't see any benefit to them. So ultimately the whole thing is that the common man is feeling that, there is nothing, these packages are packages, we are getting no benefit out of it. This is a common feeling among the poor and the middle class, perhaps even the upper class, because nobody is getting the benefit or seem to be getting the benefit.
Dr. Swamy, another question that's coming from, a lot of public folks who are watching, they're all very excited. So I'm just I've picked up 3 which are very relevant.
Yeah.
So basically, they're all saying this migrant labor, not only in India, even across the globe, even Indians abroad are also coming back and all this. So
Yeah.
have an impact on the foreign inflow. Their deposits. How significant is that impact going to be?
Oh, it's going to be substantial because they have a huge chunk they have been providing. I would say of the total foreign exchange flows that we have had, about a quarter of it came from NRI remittances. And therefore, if they are no more to send those remittances, and they have to also find jobs here, they have to find all that requires a great deal of planning, you see, and delegation of authority. But nothing has been done, and this is where corruption of the past has harmed us. I think one of the things we should do is invoke the United Nations 2005 Convention on Corruption and get the money back, just as you found, as I said, Sudan has just got its money back from the previous leader. Gaddafi, the subsequent government got Gaddafi's money back. Mubarak's money came back. Marcos' money came back. Why our people's money can't come back? In our case, at least, I know that our agencies know the bank accounts where the money is being kept, and still it is not being proceeded with. So I think that should get first priority.
See, I feel that on this issue, of NRIs who are coming back, this is an example of what will be a delayed impact. At first, they won't notice it because these guys coming back, they're okay, they're well-to-do, they're not suffering. But many of the projects in the Middle East and various places where these people were working are going to be scaled back. The projects will not need these people back. So if 100 people left, maybe 20, 30 will come back to their jobs. The rest of them, no more jobs. So the long-term recurring revenue from remittances that India took for granted will disappear. This is a very serious issue that has happened. Also, there is a lot of talk about, that India will be the manufacturing hub replacing China and things like that. But the fact is that United States is going to bring its supply chains back. Yesterday, there was an announcement, as just one of many, a large consortium of hospitals decided that they'll acquire a mask maker and a PPE maker in the United States, fund him, and bring all the mask production that is needed back to this US-based supplier. So they're not saying, okay, let's move it from China to India. They're saying, let's bring it here because the hospitals who need all these masks, we're going to make it domestically and never have this problem again. You will see a large amount of this offshoring will become onshoring. Or a lot of things will become onshore. Plus, Americans, there's unemployment, and in some of the states of the U.S., wages have not been that high. The wage inflation has been kept low. Wage inflation is so low that now you can hire Americans in certain parts of the U.S. for salaries that are pretty competitive, with the rest of the world. There's no advantage in offshoring. So that whole momentum is going to be reversed. This is a jhatka. This is a jhatka that is going to reverse some of these things. the effects of this will be very long-term and quite devastating.
Yes.
Rajiv, a brilliant point, because being in the IT industry, I see this is happening already, because all of my friends who are in industry, they are scared like crazy, because every customer of theirs is going to ask for a 20-30% cut straight.
Yes.
Because they are coming out of an economy which they have no money. So they're going to ask. It's going to have a bigger impact in India, because you're using the arbitrage of getting $1 to put 3 people instead of 1 person here. I'm just giving you an example.
Right.
That's going to have a severe impact even on the IT side, and it's going to compound the issue of generating even foreign income from IT software exports to that effect.
Yeah. So a lot of the exports in general, not only the IT software, but automobile parts. Automobile parts, because the whole automobile industry is changing. The automobile industry with the new kind of technology does not need all the parts that are made in Tamil Nadu and various places where the auto industry is. And so the restructuring of industries, which was already happening at a certain rate, is accelerating. So what the pandemic does is, short term, it puts a freeze, things stop. That's one kind of a jolt. Medium term, in a couple of years, when things are back, they are not all back the same way. Some things will not come back. So, for example, education may go online. What do you do with so much brick and mortar? Commercial real estate, I'm talking about US, commercial real estate, they're expecting that in the metros, 30-40% vacancy, because people are very happy working at home. Employers are happy, they're saving rent, and productivity is actually very high. People don't have an hour of commuting here and there in traffic. Pollution is down. So some of the changes that the pandemic forced actually are good changes, and they will last. And so you will not see everything bounce back. So India needs to have sharp people who are able to monitor and track all these things and plan accordingly. I'm not sure that either the foreign affairs people are able to do all this, or the external affairs people, or all these advisors and all that they have really are able to plot the global shift, the global tectonic shifts that are going on, and figure out short-term, medium-term, long-term, what are the scenarios, what do we do about it? That's my concern. The lack of intellectual depth in strategic thinking in a crisis like this, I don't see it in the current establishment.
Very well put, and that should bring us to the end, no?
Yes. So with this,
very valid point.
With this, we come to the end of another interesting episode. Is there an effective rescue package for India? And as articulated by Dr. Subramanian Swamy and our special guest, Rajiv Malhotra ji, we had a total understanding of the issues, although a program like this of about an hour is not sufficient for discussing all the aspects, but main points we have touched, because we have discussed this in earlier programs in small measures. So we come to an end of another interesting episode on Words of Wisdom, Gyan Ganga by Virat Hindustan Sangam channel. We'll be back tomorrow at 8 p.m. again with an important discussion or a interesting discussion, Kashmiri Hindus, the tragedy and solution. And for that discussion, we'll have Dr. Swamy along with Shri Anupam Kher, the actor, and who is a Kashmiri himself. And as you all know, that he has played a very important role as the accidental prime minister in the movie The Accidental Prime Minister. So having Anupam Kherji tomorrow and Dr. Swamy. So do tune in at 8 p.m. for this interesting episode, Kashmiri Hindus, the tragedy and solution. So see you then. Thank you. Dhanyavad and Jai Hind.
Yes, namaskar.
Namaskar.